Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of AoS Close Ups. This week we'll take a look at the lieutenants and aspiring champions of the Bloodbound, the Deathbringers. We'll take a look at the 4 versions of the Deathbringer, explore the background, the rules, and judge if they are truly worthy of the title. The life of the devotees of Khorne are often brutally short, for the blood god thirsts for skulls, and as always cares not from which the blood flows. However, there are those mighty champions who have prevailed beyond all odds during their journey of slaughter, and have achieved a destiny reserved for only Khorne's most favored chosen. These warriors are known as the Deathbringers. The path of all Deathbringers begins amongst the masses of the Blood Reavers. The weak are winnowed out through battle, the blood pits, and simple murderous disagreements. At first the fight may be just for survival, but sooner or later all dedicate themselves fully to Khorne, and those survivors soon fight for power, greatness, and glory. No matter the tool of war, be it axe, sword, spear, hammer, no warrior of the Bloodbound can match the Deathbringers' ferocity and skill, except perhaps the mighty lords of Khorne. For this reason, Deathbringers often act as lieutenants, even the second in commands for a lord. A Deathbringer will lead the hordes of the Bloodbound, yelling oaths to Khorne and challenges to foes with such fury that they are heard above all else. And though capable lieutenants as they are, a lord knows best the most important reason to keep a Deathbringer close is that they are the lord's most perilous threat. A lord can always keep a watchful eye on this would-be usurper, but Deathbringers also serve as a focal point for all aspiring Deathbringers looking forward to the next challenge for glory. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump into the rules. There are going to be 2 different types of Deathbringers, the ones on the path to glory, the aspiring ones, and the ones living it, the exalted. When we take them both and we break down their basic stats, there's not going to be too much difference between the two besides a 1-point difference in bravery. They have a movement that's going to help them easily keep pace with any of your non-mounted Bloodbound units, and they all have decent armor, but they aren't rocking that 3-up that the Stormcast Eternal heroes are. Now let's first take a look at the Aspiring Deathbringer with Blood Axe and Wrathhammer. The Wrathhammer gives this guy 1 to 3 attacks with a 3-inch range, but this little bonus isn't going to be terribly useful. I can think maybe that you can have attacks of opportunity as some combat develops against some maybe support character that may have wandered slightly too close to him, but besides this kind of unique case, you will most likely just be allocating these same 3-inch attacks to wherever the Blood Axe is targeting, who only has a 1-inch range. On the abilities front, he rewards you for failure, or at best just plain bad luck. If a Khorne hero happens to die within 6 inches of him, he gets to reroll hits and armor saves. This is not really something you'll be chomping at the bit to set up, I imagine. Moving on to the other version of the Aspiring Deathbringer, this guy is armed with 6 guaranteed every round attacks thanks to his Gore Axe and Skullhammer. In addition to losing that weapon that kind of acts like a random attack generator, he also loses that arbitrary 3-inch attack bonus. And I mean bonus. So I think this is a case of the simpler, the better. The new guy also gets a different ability called Bane of Cowards, which I think is pretty neat. If any enemy models flee within 8 inches of him, then after the Battle Shock phase is done, he can pile in and attack again. Now this won't repeat again since the Battle Shock phase is over at this point, but the decent possibility of 12 attacks in one turn from one model makes even his non-rend attacks cause for concern, I imagine, for your opponents. Now, both Deathbringers have the very effective command ability called Slaughter Incarnate, and this thing really turns these guys into force multipliers by giving all mortal Khorne units within 6 inches of him a +1 bonus to their attacks for all of their melee weapons. This alone will give him 8 base attacks, and if his little other ability goes off, that's 16 attacks in one turn. It's pretty nasty. Alright, so enough with the posers, and let's move on to the real deal. Let's talk about the Exalted. Now there's 3 kit outs for the Exalted. We have the Ruinous Axe and Skullgorger. We then have the option to take a Bloodbite Axe and a Runemark Shield. And then finally, just recently, we got the new version, which is a guy that comes with an Impaling Spear. Now let's first take a look at the version with the Ruinous Axe and the Skullgorger. This guy has a 1-inch threat range. He does 3 attacks. He hits on a 50-50, he wounds a little bit better on a 3-up. He has that important rend characteristic at a -1, and anytime he does hit and wound, he's doing 2 damage. So this guy, not a lot of attacks on his base stats at least, not hitting terribly accurately, just enough to be satisfying, but when those wounds do hit, they are pretty effective. On the defensive side, he's also a threat. Anytime you can do wounds in your opponent's phases is always a plus, and that's what his Skull Gorger pretty much lets him do. Anytime he makes an armor save of a 6-up, he's doing D3 mortal wounds to whatever just targeted him. So that's always good to have, and yeah, it's a pretty scary threat both on the offensive side and on the defensive side. So now moving on to the version with the Rune Mark Shield and the Bloodbite Axe. This guy has double the amount of attacks as 6. He's hitting a lot more accurately on a 3-up, but that's of course just a flip around because he's wounding again on 50-50. He doesn't have a rend at all, and he only does 1 damage when he does get the damage through. So this guy, a lot more attacks, way more accurate, but less impact, I should say. So unless he's going against another unit of Blood Reavers or whatever other units don't have any armor save, he may be facing a difficult time. Now he's also uniquely defensive in the fact that he's pretty specifically defensive against one thing. That is, he gets a 2-up save against all wounds caused by spells, even if they're mortal wounds. So if you're regularly going against an opponent who's bringing a normal amount of wizards and he likes to cast those type of spells, then this is probably that guy's bane, and you should find any opportunity to throw him on the board. Now moving on to the newest version, the guy with the cool beard, or the other option, which is the helmet. I would be really surprised if most people don't use the beard. He comes with an Impaling Spear, and he kind of gets the best of both worlds when it comes to weapon options. This weapon has a 2-inch threat range, so already winning there. He has 5 attacks, so just 1 less than the guy that doesn't have a lot of impact in the wounds department. He hits and wounds on 3s, so no deficit there. He even has a rend, so that's a bonus. I guess his only downside is that he does 1 damage, but really when we look at his special rule, when it comes to that damage, it's really not that much of a downside. So right off the bat, he's pretty good at killing mass troops, just like the supposed 6 attack guy, except this guy comes with a -1 rend, and he's hitting and wounding pretty accurately. Now his special ability that you would think might categorize him into only killing hordes actually makes him good against both hordes and heroes, so he's also a pretty decent hero threat. It says here that those caught on the Impaling Spear will suffer an agonizing death. Roll a dice when an enemy hero is wounded by an Impaling Spear but not slain, and on a 1, 2, 3, nothing happens. But on a 4, 5, 6, the hero suffers a mortal wound as their own weight forces them further down the haft. So, and then you continue to repeat this process until you either fail to inflict a mortal wound or the enemy hero is slain. That's pretty good. I mean, pretty much with 5 attacks hitting and wounding on 3s with a -1 rend, you're already going to do a wound or 2, and then being able to do mortal wounds right after that on a 50-50. Man, if you run lucky, you're going to kill heroes too. So he's not too bad against the hordes. He's not too bad against the heroes. And so that's, I mean, I guess that's the benefit of being new. So he's a pretty cool character, and let's now look at the command abilities. Now the command abilities for all 3 are going to be the same. It's called Brutal Command. It says that if this is your model, if this model is your general, then all Mortal Khorne units within 12 inches can use his bravery. So it's a nice substitute to maybe you don't find every time giving one unit the ability to pass a bravery test is all that important, and maybe this is something you need more. So something to maybe weigh against when you're deciding who's going to be your general. You can't even boost this ability. You can inflict D3 mortal wounds to a unit that's nearby or within 1 inch of him, and then this command ability stretches out to 24 inches, so it's pretty much a board covering ability. Now I'm not terribly sure if you will probably be doing this a lot, but it's, I guess, nice to have the option if you're terribly desperate. Now you could choose not to use these guys as your general, not take advantage of that command ability, and to reward you maybe for not doing that, this guy will get 2 additional attacks added to his stats as long as he's within 12 inches of whoever you decide to anoint as your Khorne general. So this now makes the guy with the Ruinous Axe have 5 attacks, which is pretty awesome now. His downside was the fact that he only had 3. Having 5 with those stats makes him pretty good. The guy with 6 attacks now has 8, so the amount of attacks means your opponent's probably going to be failing more armor saves, which is pretty important since he doesn't have a rend characteristic and he's only doing 1 damage. And then this guy with the Impaling Spear just becomes even more formidable with 7 attacks. Again, since all 3 of them get this ability, I think it is weighted towards one model more than the others. But you know what? We'll go over that right after the break into the next section. So usually in this section I give you some tactical tidbits, some suggestions or whatnot, but this time around I decided, we got 5 contenders here for the title of Deathbringer. Let's really measure them up and see who deserves that title. So here we go, a top 5 list starting with the worst and going to the most deserving. 5! You should know something is wrong as a Khorne devotee when your claim to fame is the shield you're carrying. This guy is definitely not worthy of the name Deathbringer. For sure, he has 6 attacks, 8 when he's throwing a fit because you didn't pick him to be the team captain, but none of his attacks have any weight to them. There's a 50-50 chance to wound, no rend, and only 1 wound. The only thing he's made for killing is armorless mages, but what does it have to say about your army when your biggest baddest mofo is stalking the playground for the kid doing magic tricks? This guy is just a schoolyard bully. 4! The aspiring Deathbringer with the Wrathflail is pretty much a poor victim of being a model. His very existence, probably just a mistake. The only reason I didn't rank him 5th was despite his individual incompetencies, he has somehow managed to inspire all around him. Maybe he's the Bloodbound's Rudy. He's got no skills, but his determination to be on the team just makes everybody want to root for him. It's unfortunately more likely that he's just the example of what's not to be. The low bar everyone minds to stay above even on their worst days. All Khorne followers might think they have it bad, but at least they're not this guy, and so he has become more of a force multiplier of sorts. 3! The aspiring Deathbringer with the Skullhammer is your Blood Warrior on PCP. With the ability to erupt with 16 attacks in any given turn, makes this the first warrior to earn the title Deathbringer. Unlike the wannabes prior, this guy is believably inspiring all those around him to attack with more fervor. The only thing this guy is lacking is a rend characteristic for at least one of his weapons. 2! Don't be fooled by this silly looking model, this guy is definitely worthy of the name Deathbringer, as long as you make him play second fiddle to whoever is really the lord of your army. On principle, I would advise making a lowly Blood Reaver your general just to rub it in this guy's ugly face. With 5 attacks, -1 rend, and doing 2 wounds each, in addition to threatening D3 mortal wounds on defense, makes this guy a good match for any unmounted Stormcast Lizardman or Fireslayer hero. 1! But do you really want a good match when you have the opportunity to curb stomp? Yeah, I think you would take that. The Impaling Spear Deathbringer is the exalted of the exalted, and he's blessed with the ability of being the new hotness. This guy has plenty of good attacks against the rank and file at 7, hitting and wounding on 3s, and all of these have a rend. But that's not even half of it. He even gets a cute little ability that makes him a serious danger to other heroes of all sorts. If you're lucky enough to run the table, I just want you to visualize this. The Impaling Spear Deathbringer walks up to a Stormcast Eternal on one of those dragons. He offers some sort of praise to Khorne, then just jabs that little stick inside the dragon all the way up into the mounted Stormcast, impaling them both. Then he uses all his might to lift them both up into the air and watches them as they slowly descend the haft of his wooden spear, somehow not being crushed underneath. You can do that with this guy. So all I can say is somebody pull that off, because that is just amazing. And that will conclude this episode of AoS Close Ups. Please like and subscribe. Feel free to comment below about what unit you'd like to see next, and thank you for watching.